Welcome. I'm Dr. Mindy Maycant. I'm an associate professor of religious studies at Lenoir-Rhyne University, where I teach theology and serve as the director of the university's Living Well Center for Vocation and Purpose. The Living Well Center hosts a speaker series called Lives Worth Living. In this series, we ask our guests to answer the question, what makes a life worth living? Today's guest is Dr. Jacqueline Bussie. Dr. Bussie teaches religion, theology, and interfaith studies at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, where she also serves as the director of the Forum on Faith and Life. She is also the author of 3 award-winning books, The Laughter of the Oppressed, Outlaw Christian, Finding Authentic Faith by Breaking the Rules, and Love Without Limits, Jesus' Radical Vision for a Love with No Exceptions. Jacqueline is also a dear friend, and I'm very grateful for her to join us here today. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much, Mindy. It's an honor to be here. And I have decided that in order to answer the question, what makes a life worth living, I have come up with a top 10 list for everybody. So my top 10 things that make life worth living. Number 1, goals that give you goosebumps. So when I was a little girl, grown-ups, often would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I always had the same answer, an authoress. Yes, it was a word that I made up. I reasoned that if boys were princes and girls were princesses, then boys were authors and girls were authoresses. And while the thought of becoming a princess made me gag, the dream of becoming an author gave me goosebumps. And it's looking back on my childhood, it's easy to figure out why. I grew up in a difficult home. There was abuse, and girls were pretty much consistently treated as less than. And so books were life-saving for me. And I would spend the afternoons making little books and stapling them together and drawing all the little pictures. And I grew up and I became a teacher, which is a job that I cherish. But it's true that for many decades, I actually lost sight of my goal of becoming a writer. Until age 37, at last I wrote and published my first book, and it won a little prize, and my publisher decided to have a dinner in celebration of that fact. And they sent me a formal invitation, and I opened it, and it read, in celebration of our author, Jacqueline Bussie. And at the sight of the word author, I got goosebumps. No one had ever called me that in my life. And at that moment, I remembered my childhood dream and I cried, I cried tears of joy. So what is a goal that gives you goosebumps? Find it, do it, and don't let anyone stop you. Number 2, something that makes life worth living is being someone's Christmas morning. Being someone's Christmas morning. So at age 32, I married my best friend from high school. His name is Matt, and he's an amazing human. And he always says to me, every time I wake up and see your face, I feel like it's Christmas morning. And the best part is, of course, that I feel exactly the same way. And being someone's Christmas morning makes life worth living. Another time, my husband and I, we rented a car for a really long road trip that we were going on, and we were only a couple of miles into the drive, and we realized that the radio didn't work. And my husband was kind of upset, and I said to him, smiling, I said, it's okay, honey, you're my music. And he always remembers that, and he often says it back to me. So what I want to say to you today is that you are someone's Christmas morning, whether they've told you or not. You are someone else's music. And don't ever let anyone tell you different. And if you want to make your life worth living, love fiercely. Number 3, greasy overalls, dirty fingernails, and God's repair shop. I know this sounds a little weird, so let me explain it. I try to live my life by the saying, pray as if everything depends on God, and act as if everything depends on you. In the Jewish tradition, there's a really beautiful concept. The understanding is that every one of us is called to take part in what the scripture calls tikkun olam. And tikkun olam is a beautiful Hebrew phrase. It has an awesome meaning. It means world repair, or to mend the world. So I like to picture it this way. God runs a repair shop, a world repair shop, and God is hiring. You are the person that God wants as a coworker. But be forewarned, the world repair work of justice seeking, of dismantling racism, sexism, income inequity, it's messy. It's gritty. It's totally sweaty and not sexy. It will dirty your fingernails. It's gonna muddy your boots. It's gonna stain your overalls. But if you're brave enough to take it on, I can promise you this. At the end of each day, you'll be able to say, now that is a day I'd never give away. So remember, God is hiring, and you are the most spectacular candidate for the job. Or if God isn't part of your worldview, just remember the words of environmentalist Paul Hawken. You are brilliant, and the earth is hiring. Reason number 4, bearing witness to wonder. Bearing witness to wonder. So I know that you remember how when you were a kid, every single day was wrapped in wonder. I mean, like everything was just completely amazing. When I was a kid, I can remember that I would spend hours just playing with inchworms. I thought they were completely magical, the way their little green bodies like dropped out of the sky on that silky thread. And I could just play with them. I was just in awe of them. And I think it's sad how as we get older, we lose that same sense of wonder. I don't know why it is, but I do think that it's tragic. Yet think about a word that we use every day, which is the word wonderful. What makes life wonderful? If it's filled with wonder. So we have to rediscover that sense of wonder. To me, wonder combines 3 A's. Rapt attention, astonishment, and amazement. So I'll tell you a story. The other day during the pandemic stay-at-home order, we were having a tough day. My husband and I were very stressed out. He actually is one of the people who lost his job to COVID-19. And then one morning, the dragonflies came. My indigenous friends have taught me here in North Dakota that North Dakota has a dragonfly season. And it's actually true. For 2 weeks, our entire town is flooded with dragonflies, if you're looking closely. And so one morning, quite recently, a swarm of about 100 dragonflies chose, for some reason, my yard to play in. And I noticed them. It was bright and early in the morning. I said to my husband, Matt, grab the coffee. We're gonna go sit outside and we're gonna watch these dragonflies dance. And we did for probably 90 minutes. And I have to tell you that when this pandemic is over, I already know that one of the days I'm gonna look back on and say, wow, that was a day I'd live again. It would be that one where we watched the dragonflies dance. We bore witness to wonder. The poet Mary Oliver once said that when she came to the end of her life, she wanted to be able to say, all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. So marry your life to amazement, and every day will be one worth living. Number 5, hints of holiness. This is a phrase that I've come up with to describe those really uncanny signs that life gives you sometimes, not always, but sometimes that you are exactly where you're supposed to be and that you're doing just what you in particular are called to be doing. So I'm going to tell you a story about a hint of holiness in my life that actually involves Dr. Mindy Maycant, our host for today. So on February 16th, 2012, I was invited to Lenore-Ryan University for the first time to give a talk for the annual Faith and Learning lecture. And while on campus, I met Dr. Maycant, I met Mindy, who asked me to guest teach her class. And I did, and we got along swimmingly. I was like, this person is amazing. We became, great friends and sister theologians in the church. So fast forward 5 years to the summer of 2017. I had just finished a book called Love Without Limits for a major mainstream Christian publisher. And unfortunately, the publisher censored several affirming stories that I had in the book about my LGBTQ friends and about my Muslim friends. And my publisher demanded that I cut those stories. And I refused. When I did, I lost my book contract. But worse yet, the publisher said that since they paid me to write the book, they own the rights unless I paid them back every dime of the tens of thousands of dollars that they had paid me to write it while I was on leave from my regular job. So of course I didn't have that money. I lived off of it for a year. So I felt as if I had lost the rights to tell my own story. I felt as if my book was being held for ransom. That's how it felt to me. And for months I lived in silence, and almost a certain sense of shame, even though I knew I made the right decision. But then one day I decided to break the silence at the advice of a friend, and I just went on social media and told my story. And thanks to some amazing people, many people, that post that I did went viral and ultimately led to another publisher discovering the book and helping me buy back the rights. But one of the amazing people who shared the post was actually Mindy. She was one of the amazing people who did that. And when she did, one of her friends from elementary school said, hey, wait a minute. Is that the same Jacqueline that we went to elementary school with back in Georgia back in the day? And then he was like, no, of course it's not. But I'm going to ask her anyway. And so she sent me a little message and she was like, hey, you've never been to Peachtree City, Georgia, have you? And I was like, I actually grew up in Peachtree City, Georgia, and lived there until I was 9. And then Mindy and I realized, oh my gosh, we were friends in the 4th grade. We took out our little 4th grade yearbooks and realized that we were in the same class. We realized that we attended the same Lutheran church in Georgia, where Lutherans are quite rare. And so I just couldn't believe it. So I just want to walk you through that one more time. So we were friends at age 9. We completely lost touch. We both became theologians who teach at Lutheran schools, and we are religion professors. We became friends again at age 42 without ever realizing for 5 years that we were best friends at age 9. So this is what I mean when I say hints of holiness. You are where you're supposed to be, and these make life worth living. Number 6, friends who weed other people's gardens. Friends who weed other people's gardens. So my friend Caroline once came from Virginia to spend a week with me in Ohio. And one day we were sitting outside chatting. It was a gorgeous day. And Caroline got up and started picking dandelions from my garden. Now she didn't stop talking or listening. She just was weeding my garden. And this went on for 15 or 20 minutes until I said, Caroline, you are so sweet, but you're on vacation. You don't need to be weeding my garden. Like, come back over here and take a seat. And at that point, Caroline looked down at her own hands and she laughed and she said, I didn't even think about whose weeds they were. I just saw them and I knew that they needed plucking. And I remember thinking, wow, I don't think I would have done that. I would have thought, well, it's not my garden and I'm on vacation. But the next thing I thought was, I need to become more like Caroline. I thought the world needs more people who love fiercely across every fence and understand that we are interdependent, that we share the garden. The world longs, for example, for more Christians who stand up for the rights of Muslims. The world needs more white folks who march for the rights of Black folks. The world needs more men who protest discrimination against women, more high-income folks who vote for living wages and healthcare for low-income folks. Friends like this make change happen. Solidarity makes life worth living. So get out there and pick some weeds, no matter where you find them. Number 7, what makes life worth living? Opening nature's mail. Opening nature's mail. So, if Mother Earth is God's creation, and I believe that it is, then we need to open the messages that she's trying to send us every day. So the other day, I was having a pretty awful day and feeling overwhelmed and a bit depressed. So I got up early and I watched the sunrise. And for once, I actually listened to what the sun was saying to me. And this is what the sun said. The sun said, if I, the sun, can climb out of bed and fight the storms and the smog for one more day, Jacqueline, so can you. Another time, I visited the orchid garden in Singapore. I don't know if you've ever walked for miles among orchids, but it's pretty amazing. It was one of the most magnificent things I've ever seen in my entire life. And I learned there that there are 30,000 different species just of orchids. Now, there are 400,000 different flowering plants in the world, and each one of those has tens of thousands of its own species just of that one kind. Isn't that amazing? What is the message there? The message, I think, is clear, that God adores difference. God cherishes variety, and so should we. Did you know that there are 100 trillion neural connections in the human brain? That's right. I did say 100 trillion, which is 1,000 times more than all of the stars in the galaxy. That's just inside of you. So what is the message there? You're a miracle. You have to believe it. The poet Rumi once said, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. Nature's messages are not spam or junk mail. They're letters written in God's own handwriting, and they are addressed to you. Read them and let them help you live better. Number 8, claiming joy as your birthright. Claiming joy as your birthright. So one night, my dear friend Suzanne, she was dying of cancer, very young. And this particular night, as I was many nights at that time, I was struck by a terrible case of insomnia. And I can't really explain what came over me, but I just had to get out of the house. And at 4:15 a.m., I put on my iPod and I went outside on my back deck and I danced in my PJs under the moon for quite some time. And I didn't dance because I felt joy, just so you know. I danced because I really wanted to kick death's joy-stealing butt. And it kind of felt like it worked. And later I remembered that in the Jewish tradition of Hasidism, people often dance on the grave of a loved one they have lost as a way of summoning God's presence in a place where they're feeling like, I don't know where God is right now. So what I love most about joy is what I just described and what I learned from my Jewish friends, which is that you can claim it no matter what. You know, happiness depends often on circumstances, but joy defies circumstances. Joy has like this weird, like in spite of character and like this take it back character. And I learned this from the author Alice Walker, who said, the secret to joy is resistance. Resistance. Resistance, I think she means to oppression, habit, injustice, silence, lukewarmness, loss, despair, death, haters, complacency. Unfortunately, we all know that the world is filled with so many of these joy stealers. Some people are misery zombies. And even if they don't mean to do it, their instinct compels them to bite you so that you will become a misery zombie with them. You simply can't let them succeed. You just can't. Please don't. So my husband, I told him about my secret 4:15 a.m. dancing, and I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to think I've lost it. But in fact, he did not. Because ever since then, sometimes at the end of a particularly hard day, my husband will turn off the lights, blast Spotify as loud as he can, and with a sparkle in his eye, say to me, dance party? So claim joy as your birthright. Number nine. This is a tricky one. Learning to compost your pain. Learning to compost your pain makes life worth living. My mother was my very best friend growing up. But when I was 20 years old, I lost her to early onset Alzheimer's disease. And many years later, I wrote a book called Outlaw Christian, which Dr. Maycant mentioned, in which I told the true story of my grief. And I came up with that phrase in the book, compost your pain. And writing the book helped me to heal a lot. And that was kind of awesome. But really, the best part was realizing that the book also could help other people to heal. And that came as a surprise. One summer day when I was on book tour, I was speaking on the book and talking about why we should no longer apologize for tears, particularly as people of faith. And when I was done speaking, an older man came up to me and he said, he's like, I'm 85 years old. And he said, my wife died last November, just about 6 months before I met him. He said, my wife died last November. He said, and I've never, ever been able to cry about it until today because you gave me permission to. And then he said, can I hug you? And I was like, but of course. But in that moment, I knew at last that I had composted the pain of my mother's death. And I'm not going to lie to you, I am not one of those people who's ever going to tell you that cancer or genocide or pandemics happen for a reason. I don't believe that. I'm not going to say that your mom died because God needed another angel, which is something that people said to me when my mother died. When we say stuff like this, I think we're just trying to deny the depths of people's suffering. We're trying to sugarcoat it or smack a pink bow on it. And suffering denied is suffering unhealed. So we have to stop. We have to start being honest. And the truth is that suffering sucks. And I make my students laugh when I talk to them about this because I say, the truth is a turd with a pink bow on top of it is still a turd. I'm sorry, but it is. Actually, I'm not sorry. But the crazy thing about turds and trash is they make incredible compost, don't they? In fact, they're the only things that make incredible compost. And I can't explain that, but I can say that one of the most liberating discoveries that I've ever had in life is that while pain should never be buried, denied, hidden, or sugar-coated, it can always, and I mean always, be composted. And it's kind of a miracle, isn't it? I've learned from my Buddhist friends that compassion is good for just one thing. And that is to help you grow in compassion for other people who are suffering too. And I should be clear that the Buddhist understanding of compassion means taking action to stop and mitigate suffering in other people's lives. So compost your pain. It's the only way to make your life and the lives of those around you flower. Last but not least, number 10. Trusting that love waits for you on both sides of the river. So I'm a professor at Concordia College, as Dr. Maycant already said, and I truly, truly love my job. For me, it's a calling. And in the warm months, I walk to work. And there is a river that separates the town where I live, which is Fargo, North Dakota, from the town where I work, which is Moorhead, Minnesota. So I have to walk over a pedestrian bridge every day to get to work. And when I cross that bridge, I always feel like as if nature herself is trying to help me transition from work to home and back again. And heading east in the morning, I'm always so excited to see my students, because I missed them during the night. And heading west in the evening, I am always so excited to see my husband, whom I've missed while I was at work during the day. And there was this amazing day where one day, as my feet hit the bridge's wood slats, I realized something that was the truest thing I knew about my life to date. And the truth was this: love waits for me on both sides of the river. So that's what I want to say to you. No matter what you have been through, may you one day too trust this to be true. Love waits for you on both sides of the river. Thank you.